Good afternoon, 8th grade Bobcats. Mr. Flato here. Welcome back to what I hope will be another great week for you here at the Helena Middle School. On this week's Bob lesson, found something new for you. I think I'm going to run this the next 2 weeks. This was on Miss Vedavati, found this for me and thought this would be a good Bob lesson topic, and I watched it and I thought it had some pretty good critical thinking things in it. This Bob lesson is by a guy named Simon Sinek. He's a British American motivational speaker, author, somewhere along those lines, and he talks about what they're seeing with millennials in the workplace right now, and 4 things that as previous generation raising millennials and how our society has kind of shifted and changed a little bit. 4 things that millennials are struggling with in the workforce as adults. As always, I'd like to put thought-provoking stuff out for you guys as 8th graders to start thinking about. My job as a school counselor, I feel like, is to inform you guys as much as possible moving forward. What I say isn't absolute, or what I put out on a Bob lesson isn't absolute. My job is to inform you guys of what I think or what's going on in the world to best set you guys up for success. And then at the end of the day, you go with what's on your heart. You go what is your truth and what makes sense to you, and you're free to make your own decisions.
Manage. And they're accused of being entitled and narcissistic, self-interested, unfocused, lazy. But entitled is the big one. And because they confound leadership so much, what's happening is leaders are asking the millennials, what do you want? And millennials are saying, we want to work in a place with purpose, love that. We want to make an impact, whatever that means. We want free food and beanbags. And so somebody articulates some sort of purpose, there's lots of free food and there's beanbags, and yet for some reason they're still not happy. And that's because they're missing. There's a missing piece. What I've learned is that I can break it down into 4 pieces. Right? There are four things, 4 characteristics. One is parenting. The other one is technology. The third is impatience, and the 4th is environment. The generation that we call the millennials, too many of them grew up subject to, not my words, failed parenting strategies. Where, for example, they were told that they were special all the time. They were told that they could have anything they want in life, just because they want it. Right? They were told, some of them got into honors classes, not because they deserved it, but because their parents complained. And some of them got A's, not because they earned them, but because the teachers didn't want to deal with the parents. Some kids got participation medals. You got a medal for coming in last, right? Which the science we know is pretty clear, which is it devalues the medal and the reward for those who actually work hard, and it actually makes the person who comes in last feel embarrassed because they know they didn't deserve it, so it actually makes them feel worse, right? So you take this group of people, and they graduate school, and they get a job, and they're thrust into the real world, and in an instant, they find out they're not special, their mums can't get them a promotion, that you get nothing for coming in last, and by the way, you can't just have it because you want it, right? And in an instant, their entire self-image is shattered. And so you have an entire generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations. The other problem, to compound it, is we're growing up in a Facebook, Instagram world. In other words, we're good at putting filters on things. We're good at showing people that life is amazing even though I'm depressed, right? And so everybody sounds tough, and everybody sounds like they got it all figured out. And the reality is there's very little toughness, and most people don't have it figured out. And so when the more senior people say, well, what should we do? They sound like, this is what you got to do. And they have no clue. Right? So you have an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations, right? Through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own, right? They were dealt a bad hand, right?
Right, that's part 1. Hopefully that has your attention. Like I stated in the intro, I'm not sure I agree or disagree with what he's saying, but I think it's important to be a critical thinker about what he is saying. He is basically saying that society, the last 10 or 15 or 20 years of parenting, has gone out, and this is an overgeneralization, but gone out and made it as easy as possible for some of their kids, trying to protect them from the harsh realities of life, telling them they can be whatever they want, special participation trophies for everybody, and turning a blind eye to the fact that the real world, real life is all about competition. Real life is about problem solving, and not everything as this goes on is going to just unfold for you in life. And what his concern was is that society, when raising kids, is sending them the wrong messages and kind of sugarcoating it, that you can go out and be whatever it is you want to be in the world, that everything's going to be handed to you on a silver platter, and then you get out in the real world and it just simply does not work that way. On this second part that's coming up, it's very similar to a lot of the stuff he talks about technology, a lot of the same stuff I covered on earlier Bob lessons about these things and how they change our brain chemistry and how it hardwires our brain in a very similar fashion to alcoholism or drug addiction or gambling addiction. And it's a good reviewer here coming up for what I talked about in previous Bob lessons to start the school year. So again, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Hopefully it's just making you think about things, and again, you decide your own truth.
Now let's add in technology. We know that engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good, right? So, we've all had it where you're feeling a little bit down or feeling a bit lonely, and so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, hi, 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 because it feels good when you get a response, right? Right? It's why we count the likes. It's why we go back 10 times to see if my Instagram is growing slower, did I do something wrong? Do they not like me anymore, right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get it, you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it. It's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down... But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right? That's basically what happened. You have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks, right? What's happening is, because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them if something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook, right? These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad, too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun, too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance, right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important to me right now, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you are addicted, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse, right? So you have a generation growing up with lower self-esteem that doesn't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress.
All right. We're off and running on this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week winners: Lillian Burr, Benjamin Patterson, Jillian Oliveira, Kale Covey, and Ellie Brennan. Come by and see me for a scoop of jelly beans. This week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week, I want to find something a little more challenging. So here we go. I have 5 letters. I sound the same when you remove my first letter. I sound the same when you remove my third letter. I sound the same when my last letter is removed, and I sound the same when all 3 are removed. What word am I? If you think you know, get your answer into the Bobbacks. Tune in next week. See if you are a winner. All right, Bobcats, let's make it a great week at the Helen